Imagine trying to pass a single really complex song down through thousands of people, like across centuries, without a single note changing.
Right, which sounds impossible.
Totally. You don't have audio recordings, you don't have sheet music. All you have is the human voice.
Yeah, the sheer physics of that just seem to completely defy human nature. I mean, you would fully expect the melody to morph or, the lyrics to drift within a generation or two.
Exactly. We all know how a simple rumor gets entirely distorted after passing through just like 5 people in a single afternoon.
Right, it's the telephone game.
But today we're looking at a text that tackles exactly that seemingly impossible feat. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Our mission today is to provide an audio overview of Lesson 1 in English, specifically looking at a fascinating manual called The Excellence and Etiquette of Quranic Recitation.
Yeah, and this first lesson really lays out the blueprint for a transmission system that hasn't just survived in writing. It's been preserved as an immersive, physical, and spiritual discipline.
We are talking about the science of Tajweed, which is the highly specific, just relentlessly structured way this text is meant to be engaged with, and recited and preserved through these continuous, unbroken chains of oral narration.
To really grasp the gravity of this system, we have to start with the foundational premise the text establishes.
Right.
In this tradition, the Quran is not viewed merely as, like, a historical book to be read for information. It is considered the literal, verbatim word of Allah revealed to the Prophet Muhammad.
And the source notes a very specific claim about that.
It does. It says that it actively challenges mankind with its shortest chapter to produce anything like it. And because of this monumental status, recitation is considered a really profound act of worship.
But what's interesting is before the text even touches on the mechanics of how you should move your lips or your lungs to recite, it dives deep into the philosophy of the person doing the reciting.
Yeah, it spends a surprising amount of time discussing human psychology and internal states.
Right? It brings up this famous saying of the prophet that compares humans to 4 different types of plants or fruits.
Yeah.
And it entirely depends on how their internal belief aligns with their external actions.
It's a great analogy. It uses sensory details, specifically taste and smell, as a metaphor for that alignment.
Smell and taste.
Yeah. So the taste of a fruit represents a person's internal hidden reality, the sincerity of their belief. And the smell represents their external actions. So the recitation of the text and the deeds that are evident to everyone in the room.
Well, when you think about it, smell is inherently public. Like, you can't really hide a strong scent.
Right.
It wafts out and it just affects everyone nearby.
Exactly.
But taste is entirely private. You don't know what an apple tastes like until you personally take a bite.
And that distinction is the key to the whole metaphor. The text states that the ultimate ideal, a believer who actively recites the Quran, is like a citron.
The citron. Yeah.
Right. A bright, really fragrant citrus fruit. It tastes incredibly sweet, which represents that solid internal foundation of belief. But it also projects this beautiful, room-altering fragrance, which represents the vocal recitation of the text.
Because, you walk into a room with fresh citrus and the entire atmosphere changes.
Yeah.
But what about someone who has that internal belief, but they just don't project it?
Like they're just quiet about it.
Yeah, like maybe they are quiet or they simply don't recite the text. Does the tradition consider them a failure?
Not a failure, but they're categorized differently. The text likens this person to a date.
Okay, a date.
Yeah. A date is deeply nourishing and incredibly sweet on the inside, so the private taste is excellent.
Yeah.
But it has absolutely no outward smell.
Wow, okay.
The internal reality is solid, but they are keeping that beauty contained. They aren't really altering the environment around them.
That feels like a very relatable human condition. Many people prefer to keep their principles entirely internal. But the text gets much sharper when it addresses the disconnect between performance and reality.
It really does. The third category is the aromatic plant, like sweet basil.
Right.
This represents a hypocrite who beautifully recites the text. To the public, it smells amazing. The outward performance is flawless.
But the private reality is toxic. If you were to taste that raw aromatic leaf, it would be incredibly bitter.
Exactly. And the text uses this to warn against the danger of just going through the motions. The outward vocal performance might sound stunning to the listener, but if the internal sincerity is missing, the entire act is rendered hollow.
And then we reach the absolute bottom of the barrel. The fourth category is a hardy, toxic desert vine called a colocynth.
Right, the desert vine.
Yeah, this is the hypocrite who doesn't even bother to recite. There's no outward smell to mask anything, and the internal fruit is bitter. It's just a complete absence of both public beauty and private sincerity.
What is most striking about this whole framework is how it forces a mirror onto the reciter. It demands that the internal and external realities match. And the source emphasizes this with another haunting metaphor. It states that a heart devoid of the Quran is like a ruined house.
A ruined house. Wow. That implies it was built for a purpose, built to be inhabited and maintained, but has just been allowed to collapse into decay.
Exactly, a structure without life inside of it. It requires both the inner reality, the taste, and the outward projection, the smell, to fully embody the purpose for which it was built.
Okay, so if projecting this text outward is that vital to maintaining the house, how does the tradition actually quantify the value of doing it? Because the source doesn't just say, you get a general sense of peace.
No, not at all.
It goes into the explicit mathematics of the reward, and it is remarkably granular.
The precision is astonishing. The text states that every single letter a person recites brings 10 distinct rewards.
The 10 rewards per letter.
Right. And to ensure there's no ambiguity about what constitutes a letter, the source provides a specific example. It mentions alif, lam, mim, which are 3 individual letters that open several chapters of the Quran.
Right, and it clarifies how to count those.
Yeah. It explicitly clarifies that alif, lam, mim is not counted as one single word yielding 10 rewards. It is counted as 3 distinct individual letters yielding 30 rewards.
That really emphasizes the absolute value of the raw atomic components of the text.
Yeah.
It's not just about absorbing a broad moral message. The literal physical utterance of the syllables has intrinsic value.
Absolutely.
And the source mentions that the expert reciters, the masters who have perfected this vocal art, are elevated to the rank of noble, righteous angels, which sounds spectacular.
It does.
But here is where it gets incredibly counterintuitive. If the flawless masters are up there with the angels, what happens to the person who is just terrible at it?
Right, that's the big question.
Because in almost every other human endeavor, sports, music, public speaking, we give the trophy to the master, and we give a polite pat on the back to the person who fumbles.
Yeah, you would expect the text to say the struggler gets a fraction of the reward, maybe 1 or 2 points for trying. But the source reveals a profound inversion of how we typically value skill.
Okay, lay on him.
The person who stammers, who finds the recitation incredibly difficult and taxing on their tongue, actually receives a double reward.
Wait, double? 100% bonus for being bad at it?
Yes.
Why on earth would a highly structured tradition reward the struggle more than the flawless execution?
So to understand the mechanics of that double reward, we have to look at a legal and social concept the text introduces called fard kifaya. This translates to a communal obligation.
Okay.
The preservation of this exact text, guarding it against even the slightest alteration, is a heavy duty that falls on the shoulders of the entire community.
Meaning if a few people do it, everyone is off the hook. But if nobody does it, the whole society carries the blame.
Precisely. The community relies entirely on a critical mass of individuals engaging with the text to keep the oral tradition alive. So the immense effort of the person who finds it agonizingly difficult, yet refuses to quit, is fiercely valued.
Wow, so they are really contributing to the survival of the text.
Exactly. The first reward is for the recitation itself, but the second reward recognizes the sheer friction of their effort. They are keeping the tradition breathing through pure grit, and the system rewards the heavy lifting required to maintain that communal obligation.
Knowing that this is a heavy communal obligation really changes how you view the act of sitting down to read. You don't just kick your feet up on the couch, grab a snack, and casually flip the book open.
Sure not.
The text details an intense physical and emotional etiquette that must be observed before a single word is spoken.
Yeah, the preparation is intensely rigorous. On a physical level, the text outlines that the reciter should face the Qibla, the direction of prayer.
Right.
They're instructed to use a miswak, which is a traditional cleaning stick made from the Salvador persica tree, to physically purify their mouth and teeth. They must be in a state of ritual purity, known as wudu, and they must wear clean clothing.
I'm fascinated by how physical actions are used to, hijack the brain.
Yeah.
You're literally setting a stage with your body to force a shift in your cognitive state.
It's totally psychological.
Imagine preparing for the most high-stakes performance of your life, or stepping into a room to meet a world leader. You wouldn't show up in sweatpants while chewing gum.
I mean, I'd hope not.
Right. By rigorously cleaning your mouth and wearing your best clothes, you are signaling to your own nervous system what is about to happen is of massive importance.
And that physical discipline acts as an anchor for the required emotional reflection. The source states that emotionally, one must approach the text with absolute humility.
Meaning what, practically?
It mandates strict boundaries. There's no laughing, no playing around, and no indulging in random distracting thoughts. The text goes so far as to say the reciter should weep, or if they cannot weep naturally, they should attempt to induce the feeling of weeping out of deep reverence for the words.
And it extends to the audience as well. If someone else is reciting, the listener is bound by rules. You must remain completely silent and reflect. You can't just throw it on as background music while you answer emails.
Right, the environment must be completely dedicated to the sound. And while the source does mandate that the reciter should beautify their voice, it instantly throws up a heavily guarded boundary around that beautification.
Oh, boundary.
Yeah, you're encouraged to make it sound melodious, but never at the expense of the linguistic rules. The text issues a strong warning against overstretching words or bending the vowels just to show off your vocal range. Aesthetics can never, under any circumstances, override accuracy.
That perfectly segues into the actual mechanics of the sound.
Right.
So you're physically purified, you're facing the right way, your heart is in a state of reverence, but you still cannot just vocalize the words however you see fit.
No, not at all.
There's an incredibly precise microscopic science to the sound escaping your lips, known as Tajweed.
The text introduces a core concept here called tartil. This means reading slowly, deliberately, and giving every single phonetic unit its exact, mandated due.
So treating every sound with respect.
Yes, some letters must be pronounced from deep within the throat and sound thick and heavy. Others are thin and light. There are mathematical rules for how long you stretch a vowel: 2 beats, 4 beats, or 6 beats.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, there are rules for nasal sounds depending on which consonant follows a vowel. It is a highly demanding technical vocal discipline.
And the source provides the historical context for this, which is vital.
Mm-hmm.
The Prophet Muhammad didn't simply receive the Quran as abstract written concepts. He received the exact physical sound of the recitation from the angel Jibril.
Exactly.
He then meticulously passed that precise audio file, so to speak, down to a dedicated core group of companions who became the absolute masters of the form, people like Ibn Masud.
This is the genesis of the oral tradition. It is a continuous, unbroken chain of face-to-face, mouth-to-ear transmission. You simply cannot learn Tajweed from a book. It must be heard and corrected by a master who heard it from a master.
There's a story in the text involving Ibn Masud that really stopped me in my tracks.
Oh, about Surah An-Nisa.
Yes. The Prophet actually asked Ibn Masud to recite a chapter of the Quran for him. When Ibn Masud reached a verse about bearing witness, the Prophet softly said, "Enough." And Ibn Masud looked up to see the Prophet's eyes overflowing with tears.
It's a very powerful moment.
But hold on, I need to push back on this scenario for a second. If the Prophet is the original source in the human chain, the one who the Quran was revealed to, why on earth would he need someone else to read it to him?
That is actually one of the most profound psychological insights offered in the source material. The text explains that the listener is actually in a far superior position to reflect deeply on the meaning of the words than the person actively reciting them.
Because the person reciting is essentially doing heavy manual labor with their brain.
Exactly. The cognitive load of applying Tajweed in real time is staggering. The reciter is simultaneously managing diaphragm control for breath, recalling the memorized text from their brain, actively applying complex rules of pronunciation, and calculating the mathematical length of every vowel, all while ensuring the articulation points in their throat and mouth are perfectly aligned. Their mind is entirely consumed by the mechanics of production.
So there's no room left for deep thought.
Right. By stepping back and asking a master like Ibn Masud to carry that heavy cognitive load, the Prophet was freeing his own mind to engage in pure, unhindered contemplation of the meaning.
Producing the art physically blocks you from fully absorbing the art. That is brilliant. So listening is not a passive activity. It is an intensely active form of engagement, liberated from the heavy lifting of the vocal performance.
It allows the meaning to bypass the mechanical processing and strike directly at the heart.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of this entire system. We have a highly technical oral tradition passing through thousands of different human mouths over centuries. How do they prevent the inevitable decay?
Right, the quality control.
Yeah, what stops one master from making a tiny phonetic mistake, passing it to his students, and slowly mutating the song?
To prevent that decay, the scholars of this tradition instituted a rigorous, uncompromising, 3-tiered quality control system. The source text outlines what are universally known as the 3 pillars of correct recitation.
And if one is missing?
If a recited reading is missing even one of these 3 pillars, it is immediately rejected and categorized as shad, meaning irregular or anomalous.
Okay, let's test the strength of these pillars. What's the first line of defense?
The first pillar is that the recitation must align with Arabic grammar. But the text provides a fascinating nuance here. It states that even a seemingly weak or obscure grammatical variation is fully accepted if it can be historically proven.
Give me an example of that.
It cites a famous reading by a scholar named Ibn Amir in Surah Al-An'am. He recited a specific verse using a passive verb form, zuyina, instead of the common active form. This completely changed the grammatical case of the nouns following it.
Okay.
Many linguistic purists and grammarians argued fiercely against it, claiming it was clunky, awkward Arabic.
Wait, if the grammar experts say it's clunky, doesn't that prove the oral tradition made a mistake?
Yeah,
Why would the text accept it?
because the oral tradition supersedes grammatical theory. The text explicitly states that an authentically transmitted recitation does not need to bend to the rules of grammarians.
Oh, wow.
Rather, the authentic recitation is the raw data that grammarians must use to write their rules. The Quran dictates the boundaries of the Arabic language. The language does not dictate the Quran. If the oral chain is proven, the grammarians simply have to update their textbooks to accommodate the newly verified structure.
The data dictates the theory. That is an incredibly confident stance. Okay, what is the second pillar?
The second pillar dictates that the recitation must match the Uthmanic script. This refers to the master skeletal copies of the written text that were meticulously compiled and distributed during the reign of the third caliph, Uthman.
I am trying to visualize how a vocal sound matches a skeletal script. It's like if I write the English word color using only the consonants C, L, and R.
Yeah.
If one person reads it aloud as color and another person reads it aloud as clear, both of those spoken words fit perfectly inside the visual boundary of that CLR skeleton.
That is the perfect analogy for how Arabic script functions. The text gives a concrete historical example of this. Take the word Maliki in the opening chapter, which translates to master. The Uthmanic script writes it without the long A vowel marker.
Okay.
Therefore, reading it verbally as Maliki with a short A matches the text literally. However, reading it as Maliki with a drawn-out long A matches the text hypothetically because ancient Arabic script routinely omitted long vowel markers.
So both are totally fine.
Both pronunciations are entirely valid because neither breaks the visual boundary of the skeleton you described. It also cites a verse in Surah At-Tawbah where the word min, meaning from, is included in the recitation because it was physically verified to exist in the specific manuscript that Uthman sent to Mecca.
So the skeletal script acts as a hard visual guardrail. And the third pillar.
The third, and arguably the most crucial, is tawatur. This means a profoundly authentic, continuous chain of transmission. Every single teacher in the chain must have learned it directly, mouth to ear, from their teacher, going all the way back to the prophet.
Okay.
And it must be transmitted by such a massive, diverse number of independent chains at every single generation that it is mathematically and logically impossible for them all to have colluded to forge a mistake.
It functions exactly like a decentralized blockchain network.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, you have thousands of independent nodes constantly verifying the exact same data. If one node tries to introduce a mutated vowel, the rest of the network immediately rejects it because it doesn't match the historical ledger.
That's an excellent modern equivalent. If a reading possesses perfect grammar, and it fits the Uthmanic script flawlessly, but it lacks that unbroken, mass-verified oral chain of tawatur, it is completely thrown out. The oral verification is supreme.
And even within that incredibly strict, peer-reviewed system, there are still regulated paces at which you are permitted to recite.
Right, the 4 speeds.
The text lists 4 acceptable speeds. There's tartil, which is the slow, deliberate, ideal pace we discussed earlier. Then there's tadwir, which is a medium-moderate pace for regular recitation. There is hadr, which is quite fast. But even at high speed, you are strictly forbidden from slurring or dropping the rules of Tajweed. And finally, tahqiq, a heavily exaggerated, very slow pace used strictly for teaching beginners the mechanics.
The inclusion of these paces really highlights the system's focus on boundaries. The text warns that even when reading slowly and melodiously, you cannot over-embellish.
And this brings up my absolute favorite metaphor from the entire text. It uses a striking visual to describe the danger of overdoing the recitation. It says that proper reading is like whiteness.
Whiteness, yeah.
If there is too little whiteness, the color becomes brown or dark and muddy. But if there's too much whiteness, it becomes a disease, like leprosy. It even quotes a scholar who is warning a reciter who is showing off, saying, "What is beyond reading is no longer reading."
It is a brilliant, slightly alarming metaphor for vocal discipline.
It makes perfect sense if you think about a pop singer performing the national anthem at a major sports stadium. We all know the exact melody of the song,
Sure.
but sometimes a singer will add 50 extra vocal runs, trills, and breathy notes to the word brave. They think they're making the song more beautiful and emotional, but they're actually destroying the structural integrity of the melody. You can't even sing along anymore.
They've completely mutated the core architecture of the song for the sake of aesthetics. The text explicitly warns against this. It states that overstretching the vowels or hyperpronouncing the consonants actually generates phantom, unintended letters that were never meant to be there.
Wow, phantom letters.
You are quite literally adding unauthorized data to the Quran in your attempt to make it sound pretty. The rules of Tajweed act as an iron fence to prevent the destruction of the text on both extremes. It prevents people from rushing and eroding the words, but equally prevents people from over-embellishing and expanding the words.
The precision is mind-boggling. When we step back and look at the ground we've covered today from this first lesson, the sheer scale of the system is awe-inspiring. We started with the immense philosophical status of the text, exploring that vivid analogy of the citron and the colocynth.
Right, how the private taste of belief must perfectly align with the public fragrance of action.
We uncovered the surprising mathematics of reward, where the stammering, struggling reciter earns double the points of the master. We examined the intense physical and emotional stage setting required just to approach the words.
We did.
We unpacked the massive cognitive load of the oral tradition and discovered why a listener can actually reflect deeper than the reciter. And finally, we dismantled that rigorous three-pillar system: grammar, skeletal script, and decentralized mass transmission that locks the tradition in a linguistic vault.
It truly is a profound living ecosystem of preservation. And if we connect all of these meticulous rules and analogies back to the broader picture of human history, it leaves us with a compelling concept to consider.
Fard kifaya, right.
Yes, that idea of fard kifaya, the communal obligation. This intricate oral tradition only survives because specific individuals willingly take on the agonizingly heavy burden of mastering it. They don't just do it for personal spiritual gain. They do it so the community as a whole does not lose its foundation.
Right.
In our modern, highly individualized world where we are obsessively focused on our personal careers and personal skill sets, it forces a deeply uncomfortable question.
What's that?
What critical knowledge, what vital human skills, or what ancient necessary traditions are we right now simply hoping a small group of unknown experts is preserving somewhere in the background so that the rest of our society doesn't entirely collapse? We rely completely on those willing to shoulder the communal burden, almost always without ever realizing it.